Daniel stepped through the entrance. That evening, he had no notion about his life was going to crumble, and I desire a divorce, murmured his wife, Sarah, her voice. Quiet but frigid, there was no preamble. A touch of emotion in her tone. Just four stinging words that abandoned him temporarily. They had been frozen in place for 7 years. They made a life with their 5-year-old. Daniel's life revolved on his son, Lucas. I'm sure there have been disputes. Recently, more than usual really, but Daniel had chatted it up with the natural ebb and flow of matrimony. He is never. I thought Sarah was ready to walk away. What he finally got to ask is a scarcely audible voice. Murmur why Sarah shrugged, avoiding his. I've noticed that glance is no longer functioning. I'd already made up my mind. Daniel felt his. There was no debate or. It was an effort to repair things. She had plainly made one choice, planning for a few weeks that. It was followed by a haze of cold negotiations and bitter revelations. Sarah wanted the home, vehicle, and complete custody of Lucas. She was also demanding child support regardless of. Daniel had been shouldering the most of their financial duties. For years, he had toiled hard, providing for his family, and now feel like an afterthought, a means to a goal. His lawyer attempted to reassure him. Sarah's requests were normal and reasonable. Divorce, but it felt like betrayal. He couldn't understand how someone he had loved and trustworthy may be so calculated. Every talking with Sarah felt like a fight, and the stakes were always Lucas. Sarah recommended a custody arrangement. This would restrict Daniel's time with him, son, to just 2 weekends a month. The concept of seeing Lucas seldom was unbearable. Lucas was more than just his. He was a reason Daniel pushed during lengthy work weeks and life's difficulty battling for Char's custody. Daniel's whole focus, even as the burden from the divorce started to weigh. Sarah dropped him the first time. Lucas is gone for their weekend together. Daniel sensed the tension before she. Even when she approached the door, she hardly glanced. Her motions were quick, and, mechanically, she gave out Lucas. Backpack, ensure he's in bed by 8 p.m. Stated curtly, as if she still had influence over Daniel's time with him. Own son without waiting for an answer. She turned and went away, not even sparing Lucas a farewell inside. Apartment. Daniel attempted to shake off the confronted and focused on his kid Lucas. Chuckle and boundless energy were the only things keeping him grounded, yet just as much. Daniel treasured those weekends. Came at a cost he had to cut down on. Work hours to accommodate Lucas, and money was tighter than ever. Moving into a tiny flat helped, but the monthly child support payments remain. There is little place for anything else. Every month, like clockwork, Sarah would call to remind him if a payment is even AD. Lately, she did not worry about the finances, the pressure he was under, or the sacrifices he was making to maintain their son's life as. Her tone remained as consistent as possible, sharp, accusing, as if Daniel was failing Lucas only by straining to make ends meet. The strain reached a. Daniel's employer summoned him at the workplace one Monday morning. His employer has noticed a decline in performance. Stated plainly, I know what you're going through. Some personal issues, but we need you. If that is not feasible, be completely present. We'll need to review your viewpoint. Here, Daniel attempted to explain, his voice tinged with, in desperation, I am weighing everything. Can my kid get divorced? It's been hard, but I will do better. I only need some time. The boss groaned plainly. Unmoved. Time is a luxury we cannot afford. Right now. I'm sorry, Daniel. A month later, the inevitable occurred. Daniel lost his job after 15 years of commitment and hard work gone in a flash. Severance payout was modest, and his savings started dwindling quicker than he believed feasible despite his best efforts. Attempts to locate alternative employment offers coming in were insufficient to support his expenditures, let alone child support. Payments. Daniel missed his first payment. 3 months after losing his job, he feared the encounter with Sarah, and when she called, it was worse than he had expected. I assumed her voice was loaded with fury and scorn. Do you even care about Lucas? She said, you can't just stop paying because it is inconvenient for you, Daniel. He attempted to reason with her, in his tone, begging, I've done all I can. I've been hunting for jobs nonstop. The urge for extra time does not pay off. Bill, Sarah snapped before hanging up. The tension of it all came to a head. Early in the morning, a loud tap on his. The door startled Daniel awake, and 2 police officers stood beyond their emotions. Grim Daniel Roberts, one of them asked him, nodded, his stomach sinking, and you're beneath arrest for unpaid child support. Officers said, reading Daniel's rights, while they put shackles around his wrists. As he was dragged away, Daniel could consider what Lucas would do. Explain this to his kid. Inform Lucas that his father has been seized to prison for neglecting to pay for him. Shame was awful, yet deep inside, Daniel realized he hadn't given up. He simply needed a chance to make things right. Daniel stepped before the judge, feeling the weight of the courtroom's gaze at the charges for unpaid child support were serious. He hoped his lawyers' defense would be sufficient to convince the. In the end, his counsel underlined Daniel's endeavors to obtain jobs and his devotion to Lucas's financial troubles. After losing his position, the judge, stern-looking dude, spectacles perched, Mr. listened closely with his nose down. Robert started, and I understand, despite the hurdles you failed to fulfill your child support responsibilities. This is a severe concern, as I also recognize your honest efforts designed to keep active in your son's life. Daniel held his breath, waiting for. I am condemning you to 30 days in the county prison. The judge proceeded, although I'm also purchasing 200 hours of community service will be conducted over the following 6 months. You will be needed to attend financial counseling sessions may help you cope. Your responsibilities are moving forward. Relief and fear were washed. Daniel's 30 days in prison were still heavy punch, but that was much better than. For months, he had dreaded the neighborhood. Service and counseling, although challenging, given him a glimpse of hope, a structured path to begin repairing his life. Daniel's time in prison was hard. He sought consolation in the fact that will be done in a month. He kept his head down, avoided danger, and spent his nights thinking about Lucas the tiny, the harsh sunlight, and the unending noise of the detention center alone. He strengthened his commitment to regain his life back on track after his 30 days were up. Finally, Daniel stepped out of the county prison. Seemed lighter and burdened. His parents waited to pick him up. Their grins are warm yet tainted with worry. They held him closely, offering words of encouragement as they drove him back to his little flat. His first weekend with Lucas after the release was bittersweet. Lucas didn't seem to understand where Daniel had been, and Sarah has apparently told him little. Lucas's pure laughter and unending. The questions were a bombshell for Daniel. Spirit is damaged, yet every embrace and grin reminded him of what he would lose if he did not get his life in order. Next week, Daniel poured himself into his. He was ordered by the court to do community service, allocated to a nearby shelter, working with maintenance work and arranging donations. At first, the responsibilities seemed like penalty, but he eventually discovered a surprising sensation of pleasure witnessing the gratitude of the shelter personnel and the folks they aided. Reminded Daniel he still has the potential to create a Difference not just for Lucas, but for others, as well as part of his punishment. Daniel also attended financial. The counselor conducts therapy sessions. Denise, a no-nonsense lady, assisted. He creates a reasonable budget and investigate ideas he hadn't explored. Before, you were carrying this weight. She said that she had been alone for too long. There are resources out there. Daniel started using them with Denise's guidance. Apply for career training programs that could assist him adapt into a new profession. He began searching at methods to renegotiating his child support, responsibilities, expecting that the courts would take his current financial troubles account, then one day some tea. No, this was seeing. A letter came in the mail. It was from Megan, is Sarah's former co-worker. Megan and Sarah were close years ago, friends, and via their relationship, Megan had come to know Daniel well. But over time, their communication diminished, particularly after Megan departed the firm. Seeing her name on the envelope triggered. Daniel feels a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Why would Megan reach out now? After all these years, taking a big breath, he opened the envelope and started to read. Before you discover what occurs next, please subscribe to the channel. Letter was short yet packed weight. That caused Daniel's hands to quiver. Megan did not spend time reading it. Pleasantries going right into the reason she had written Daniel live. I hesitated whether to write this letter for months. I realized this may seem unexpectedly, but I couldn't keep this. Back then, Sarah and I worked together and overheard stuff, conversations that did not sit well with. At the time, I did not believe it was my place to say anything, but now knowing I can't remain after all you've gone through. Daniel's chest constricted. As his eyes raced across the lines, Megan revealed how Sarah had often discussed about a guy called Eric and a name Daniel. According to Megan, they did not recognize. Sarah had described meeting him long before the divorce, even hinting at it. I'm not sure whether you have an ongoing connection. Ever noticed anything Megan wrote, but I always believed there was more to it. Sarah L. on I regret not expressing anything before, but I assumed it was none of my business now that I've suffered so much that I feel like I owe it. To tell you the truth, the lines of the letter struck Daniel like a sledgehammer. If there's any possibility Lucas may not be yours, deserve to know. I'm really sorry if this message causes you suffering, but I think you have the right to. The truth. Daniel placed the letter on his. Ideas are whirling in all directions. Megan's statements raised uncertainties in him. He never permitted himself to entertain. Could that truly be true, Lucas? He rose up from the kitchen table and started pacing the room, the letter still gripped in his fist. Recollections. Late nights, mysterious absences. Sarah's unexpected chill rushed back into. His every experience was now tinted with the frightening prospect that Lucas was his world. The prospect of losing their relationship with. Even questioning it was terrible, but what Megan had written was accurate. Daniel. He knew he could not ignore it. He had to discover the truth, no matter how difficult. It may be. The following morning, Daniel. I phoned his lawyer and need to make arrangements for a paternity test. He stated, his voice stable yet weird, trained as soon as possible. In the weeks leading up to paternity tests were among the longest Daniel's life. Each meeting with Lucas felt bittersweet as he was clinging on to something weak and uncertain. If it slipped through his fingers, I tried to be regular for Lucas' sake, but every chuckle, every embrace included in the undertone of Daniel dreads the day of the exam. He drove to the doctor with a knot in his. Sarah had already arrived with. Lucas came, and she sat stiffly in the waiting room, her arms crossed, averting his look. Lucas is oblivious to the. Daniel smiled as tension embraced him, and a happy hello to Dad Daniel's heart. With the sound of those words, the exam itself was basic and short. Cheek swab for both him and Lucas. The emotional impact was everything, but Daniel just exited the clinic. Couldn't stop himself from looking back. Lucas waved at him in the doorway with Sarah. He waved back. He swallowed the lump in his throat. The results were expected within 2 weeks, but every day felt like an eternity to Daniel. Threw himself into community service and job applications, attempting to distract himself from the continuous gnawing anxiety every time his phone buzzed. The mail arrived, and his heart skipped a beat, wondering if the results had arrived. Finally, Daniel received the envelope. He stood in his small apartment, staring. Placed it on the kitchen counter as if were some ticking time bomb in his hand. He carefully picked it up and shook it. Tore open the words on the page. Appeared to blur together, but his eyes locked on the percentage that responded. Everything. 0%. He was not Lucas' father. Daniel stumbled back and sank into the nearest chair as the paper floated to the. He stared blankly ahead, feeling the weight of 4 years falls on. Lucas, the boy he had loved, raised and fought for, was not his biological son's. Pain was indescribable, a combination of heartbreak and anger and betrayal. After what seemed like hours, Daniel forced himself to pick it up, phone, and call his lawyer with the results. When he entered, he spoke in a hollow tone. "Not mine. I want to move ahead with all fraud charges, child support adjustments." His lawyer agreed to begin the process immediately, but Daniel hung up the emptiness. He lingered, knowing that the legal battle would bring some measure of justice, but would not heal the wound in his heart. Next weekend, when Lucas comes over, Daniel, he struggled to control his emotions. Lucas was not aware of any of this. Daniel was still his father, the one who we put him up at night and played catch. At the park, Daniel decided to keep it. That is, until the courts determined what happened next. Yet with each, throughout the day, Daniel had a rising sensation, determining if Sarah had misled, if she had taken away years from him, life, and manipulated him. She wouldn't get away unharmed. He would fight not out of revenge, but to regain his dignity and secure his future. Lucas may have the courtroom hummed with anxiety as Daniel T. Ohish seat next his lawyer across the room. Sarah met with her own counsel. Expression is as composed as ever. Daniel knew her too well. Her hard stance as she avoided staring at. He exposed her anxieties throughout the process. Started with both parties giving their. Sarah's lawyer portrayed her as a struggling single mother who has made faults but operated in Lucas' best interest. Daniel's lawyer, on the other hand, lost interest, spending no time setting the basis for damning case. Your Honor, Daniel lawyer. I started standing tall and confident. Client was a victim of a deliberate and protracted deceit. Evidence suggests that the defendant, Sarah, Robert, intentionally misrepresented the paternity of their son, Lucas, as well, perpetrating financial fraud and demanding. My client is receiving child support under bogus circumstances. Pretenses. Sarah's lawyer protested. To your honor, these claims are false and speculative. The judge, is stern but fair lady, lifted her hand to quiet the room. Counselor, I'll let it continue. Daniel's lawyer nodded and returned to the court. Not only did M. Roberts, we purposefully deceived Mr. Roberts, but proof that she also extorted. Eric Montgomery provides financial assistance. Lucas' biological father murmurs. Sarah's words resonated across the courtroom. Composure snapped for a short second. A flash of terror crossed her features before she hastily concealed it. Your Honor, the lawyer added, we have obtained evidence from Mr. Montgomery himself, acknowledged under the penalty of perjury. Roberts threatened to kidnap him. The court for formal child support. Payments unless he compensated her under the. She had persuaded him to think that the judicial system would extract far more money than he was giving, preying on his worries and leveraging their common secret to control him. The judge's gaze sharpened as she gazed at Sarah. Is this true, Miss Roberts? Sarah's lawyer rose. Promptly honor these claims. Are unsubstantiated. We would need to evaluate the legitimacy of this alleged testimony. Daniel's lawyer was ready, as we expected. This answer is in your honor, and supplied copies of text messages. Exchanges between M. Roberts and Mr. Montgomery's messages are definitely out of line. She threatened to expose him unless he continued to pay her straight. The bailiff handed up the printed messages to the court, who started reading in the silence of the room. Was quiet enough for Daniel to hear his own pulse when the judge finally, looking up, her face was one of disappointed, and Miss Roberts condemned her. These messages convey a strong tone, a clear picture of your activities. Did you trick Mr. Roberts into believe he was Lucas' father? But you had tricked Mr. Montgomery into providing financial assistance under stress. This conduct is also immoral, unlawful. Sarah's lawyer muttered. I was irritated with her, but Sarah appeared to surprise, said to answer when she finally. She said, her voice unsteady but resolute. I only wanted to preserve your honor. Lucas, I did not want him to suffer due of Eric's recklessness or Daniel's failures. Daniel saw a rush of indignation over her statements, but his lawyer stayed calm. Your honor, my client has worked hard to provide for Lucas despite Miss Roberts' deception. Lucas deserves justice. The judge had a steady and honest upbringing. Agreed. I agree with Miss Roberts' conduct constitutes fraud and extortion. The court cannot condone such behavior, especially when it affects well-being of a kid. She halted and allowed the weight of her words sinks in. I am sentenced you to 2 years in jail for fraud and extortion. In addition to Mr. Roberts received reparation payments for he supplied child support under false pretenses, and custody of Lucas will be granted to Mr. Roberts. The crowd erupted in whispers as Sarah. She collapsed in her seat, her face pallid. The first time Daniel saw actual dread in her gaze, not the intentional coldness she had shown during the divorce. That judge hammered her gavel order in court. This hearing is delayed because Sarah was. Daniel sat quietly as they carried him away in handcuffs, trying to absorb what had just transpired. Alleviation fatigue, a bizarre sensation of triumph was all he had inside himself. A battle for the truth, and now justice had been served. The judges. The decision to grant custody to Daniel. It wasn't simply about punishing Sarah, about defending Lucas. Notwithstanding Daniel wasn't Lucas's biological father, love for the kid was apparent. Through the process Daniel had, he made it obvious that he could not forsake Lucas, whom he had nurtured as his own kid. Not simply a name on a birth certificate or duty specified. According to court papers, he was Daniel's son. Eric was successful in every manner that counted. The other hand had exhibited no interest in. He had not taken on a fatherly role before, challenged custody, or appeared at the hearing demonstrating his participation had been entirely financial for Lucas. Daniel was a bright, tender-hearted youngster, the only constancy in a world that has been rocked by his mother's treachery and the approaching imprisonment. Without Daniel's Lucas' future may have this spiraled into uncertainty. Unwavering dedication that persuaded the judge grants Daniel custody and act. This ensured that the kid will grow up in a safe, caring atmosphere with the only parents that actually cared. In the months, Daniel's life steadily changed after the trial. He started to stabilize and obtained a solid job at a nearby corporation, allowing him to balancing work and caring for his parents. Ever sympathetic, jumped in to assist with Lucas anytime Daniel needed additional hands. A time to gather his breath. Together they established a warm, loving environment. Atmosphere for the Oungster who flourished. Sarah was discharged while under their care. Daniel was released from jail 2 years later. Her to visit Lucas on occasion, monitored. First, to secure his son's well-being. Sarah was previously arrogant and calculating. Now, her confidence appeared shattered, and it was replaced with calm humility. Rebuilding her life was an uphill fight. The weight of her criminal record and a ruined image facilitated obtaining job and stability. Challenging, and she often abandoned them. Visits teary-eyed during her journey ahead. Daniel was hesitant and concentrated on what mattered most was making Lucas happy. Stable childhood, the boys laughing. A continuous resonated throughout their house. A reminder of why Daniel had battled so. He wasn't only reconstructing his own, he was constructing a future for Lucas. Could grow up knowing love, honesty, the strength to conquer even those toughest of difficulties. If you love this post, please subscribe to the channel, and I wish you excellent mood and excellent luck.